Good morning. I'm Dr. Jason Bolton, Vice President of Community Partnerships and Admissions at the Help Group, and I'll be moderating today's webcast, Benefits of a Strengths-Based STEM Education for Neurodiverse Students. Since last August, we have offered previous webcasts that have covered distance learning during the closure of school, how parents can help their students at home, finding perspective amid all the chaos, social skills, the mental health impact of the pandemic on our youth, and most recently, we addressed making proper use of neuropsychological assessments. If you find any of those interesting, or all of them, I hope, you can find them, all of our webcasts on our website at www.thehelpgroup.org. With that, I would like to introduce today's panelists, Dr. Ellis Crasnow and Rebecca Beam. Ellis Crasnow is a Los Angeles-based educator, innovator, and entrepreneur engaged in transforming lifelong opportunities for special needs students. A pioneer in developing new teaching models for empowering students across the autism spectrum, Dr. Crasnow is a specialist on issues surrounding STEM, technology, and special needs. He holds a doctorate in philosophy from USC with a focus on the philosophy of science. He's the director of STEM education and online learning at the Help Group and founding director of STEM Cubed Academy. Dr. Crasnow is a frequent speaker at conferences nationally and internationally, and on the importance of STEM education, special education, emerging technologies, and neurodiversity in the workplace. Rebecca Beam is the founder and CEO of Zavikon. Zavikon is an employment agency dedicated to placing individuals who are neurodivergent and those with disabilities in career-focused employment. Prior to launching Zavikon, she was a founding advisory team member launching MindSpark Inc., whose mission was to train and employ adults on the autism spectrum in technology careers. After MindSpark's acquisition by Auticon, Rebecca became president of the U.S. operations, leading the U.S. expansion and driving growth. As a veteran of the tech sector, Rebecca's career has included senior leadership roles, sourcing and developing human capital with high demand skill sets for the area's leading tech firms, including Fortune 500 brands. Rebecca believes there is a job out there for everyone to apply their talents and skills in a meaningful way, and she is dedicated to being a bridge to an inclusive working world. She is passionate about opening doors for all individuals with disabilities or those who are neurodivergent to achieve career success. We at the Help Group are honored, once again, that you have chosen to spend another hour with us. For those of you joining us for the first time, let me tell you a little bit about what we do. Among other social and mental health services, the Help Group operates 16 non-public schools in Los Angeles and Orange counties, serving students with autism spectrum disorders, learning disabilities, ADHD, developmental delays, and emotional challenges. We contract with more than 80 local school districts to provide special education and related services to more than 1,100 students. Today, you will hear our expert panel discussing the benefits of a strengths-based STEM education for neurodiverse students. As we talk, you will still have the opportunity to submit questions using the chat button below at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And in the 20 minutes or so of today's webcast, we will devote some time, in the final 20 minutes or so, we'll devote some time to answering your questions that you put there in the chat. I will now turn it over to Dr. Ellis Crasnow to speak about the benefits of a strengths-based STEM education for neurodiverse learners.
Thank you, Jason, for the introduction. Today, we'll explore the relationship between a number of different concepts. First, neurodiversity and what it means. Also, who does it include? Second, STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. What is it about STEM that lends itself so well to certain kinds of minds? And lastly, we'll explore the strengths of many of the kinds of learners that we educate. Individuals with autism, ADHD, OCD, ED, and many other conditions. All too often, the focus is on these learners' deficits, on where they struggle, and almost no time at all is spent concentrating on what they're drawn to, on what enthralls them, on what drives them. What we'll find is the story of what these individuals are capable of is very different from what you might have been led to believe. Neurodiversity is the idea that the human brain has evolved with contributions from many kinds of minds, from autistic minds, hyperactive minds, obsessive minds, inattentive minds, distracted minds, creative minds, anxious minds, compulsive minds, depressed minds, and they're all necessary and have been necessary to human evolution. This view has not always been mainstream, but as it gains currency and becomes more accepted and widespread, it will have even greater implications for the education of students on the autism spectrum and other neurodiverse learners, and their acceptance into the workplace and society. Autistic minds are capable of great focus on detail, something that the neurotypical mind, with its tendency to gloss over things, often overlooks. Individuals with dyspraxia, sometimes called developmental coordination disorder, are big picture thinkers, great at spotting patterns and at inferential reasoning. Due to the challenges they face, they are often self-reliant problem solvers. Individuals with dyscalculia can be creative, strategic thinkers and problem solvers, skills they also learn in meeting the challenges they face in dealing with mathematical concepts, with numbers and manipulating them. Similarly, those with dyslexia and ADHD can be very creative. I once did an intake with a child who was so distracted that it was almost impossible for him to complete a single sentence. He whizzed around my office, picking up objects, asking about each, and no sooner did he have an answer to his question than he was on to the next. I could only imagine what his mind must be like, that insatiable curiosity that made his interest and focus flit like a butterfly from one idea to the next. What is needed in situations like this is encouragement and support to harness without limiting and deriding. An exclusive focus on the negative, on the perceived deficit, doesn't encourage self-confidence, self-esteem, or growth. Like the caregiver who corrects and points out what shouldn't be done without ever saying what should be done and never offering a positive alternative, this kind of mind needs room and space to flourish, but also lots of support. Autism is at the center of creating a strength-based STEM program because of autistic learners' affinity for STEM. They're drawn to it because of their personal abilities and interests. The question is, however, how do we best prepare them for college and career and keep them interested and engaged in STEM pursuits for that future, for success after graduating from high school? One way is to arrange internships. A couple of years ago, a 9th grade student developed a deep interest in biology. He delved into biochemistry, microbiology, and biophysics. He was insatiable with regard to anything to do with biology. We were fortunate to have a parent at the time who arranged an internship in his own research lab for the student over the summer. It was an opportunity for him to do serious work in a serious environment and to be taken seriously. It was an invaluable experience and one that he was profoundly grateful for. Today, the young man is in college majoring in biology. Not every student shares the promise or the interest of this student, but there is no question that providing the opportunity to excel, to explore, to thrive, is an essential ingredient in their success, and without it, their pathway is much less clear. Temple Grandin, herself autistic and a college professor, author, presenter, and autism activist, once remarked that a dash of autism seems necessary in great science and art. And evidence is increasingly mounting that many tasks and skills are better performed by autistic people, even by those who are nonverbal, than neurotypical ones. This is particularly true of their ability to process complex patterns. But autism does not only favor the sciences. Stephen Wiltshire, whose work you're seeing here, was mute as a child and couldn't interact with other people. He was diagnosed with autism at age 3 and unable to communicate. He was alone in his world. This is a panorama of Singapore, which he drew from memory after a short helicopter ride. Stephen has drawn cityscapes from memory of Rome, Hong Kong, Frankfurt, New York, London, Los Angeles, and many others. I want to live in a world in which individual differences are celebrated, where alternative ways of looking at things enrich the discourse and the outcome, where autism is not a disorder, something to be maligned and cured, but an individual difference, something to be respected and supported. And these artists are examples of individuals who enrich, who give us much to admire and be thoughtful about and support. One of my favorite general truths is it's not what you know that counts, it's what you can do with what you know. STEM is the embodiment of applied learning, of robotics, electronics, of AR and VR and AR, of exploring and developing at the edges of what's known. It's a breeding ground of new ideas and of makers and breakers from all disciplines and all areas of interest, from astrodynamics to zoology, to apply what they know in hitherto unexplored ways. This image is an almost perfect example of what a classroom should look like. Students around the table, all engaged, interacting with each other, awed and excited by what they're seeing and doing. The only organism perhaps less than happy is the frog in the dissecting tray being worked on. STEM offers numerous opportunities for neurodivergent learners to engage and improve upon their skills that they're working on strengthening. They work collaboratively and cooperatively on projects like this, which improves their social and emotional development, involving them in the give and take of negotiating with their peers, something they have to learn to do. Notice the teacher too in the center of the room, ready to step in if necessary, but content to let the students, pardon me, let the students explore together. Notice also the verbal and non-verbal communication, great practice for the future and the possibility of developing peer relationships by experiencing something together. When there's a discussion of an autistic mind, what it's capable of, what its nature is, the conversation is almost inevitably negative. It's about echolalia, repetitious behavior, lack of social communication and eye contact. It's almost never about strengths, about what the individual can do, about their passions and interests. I think each of us would have been discouraged, dismayed, and depressed had our education for the 12 plus years we were in school been all about what we did poorly rather than about what we do well, about our challenges and weaknesses to the exclusion of all else. Turns out, however, that those on the spectrum have a wide variety of strengths, many of which have fortunately by now been well recognized. One is their ability to stay hyper-focused on a topic. We all know of young persons who develop interests and passions in trains or marine biology, in Legos or robots, in cartoons or periods of history. The first time we entered a first robotics competition, a group of us went down to a high school in Placentia, California, and the challenge was to build a functioning robot from scratch in just one day. It was this great opportunity. The team had never built a functioning machine before, and so it was a huge challenge, but there would be lots of support. Our team worked that day from 8 a.m. in the morning to 5 p.m. with just one 10-minute break for pizza. I've never seen students so engaged, so motivated, and so enthralled. It was one of the best days the team ever had in building. Having a broad knowledge of a subject of interest is another trait that autistics share. It is not uncommon to find persons on the spectrum who have an encyclopedic knowledge of some area of interest. I've had students who have detailed and thorough knowledge on topics as diverse as the Stasi, the East German secret police, and airport arrivals and departures, together with making extraordinary scale model structures of airports and hangars for where the various major aircraft are housed. These talents can be awe-inspiring, and guiding them to good use, to a practical and worthwhile outlet, is how we perceive our role as educators. Without going through each strength in detail, what's often overlooked is their loyalty and directness. There is no guile in them. What they think and feel they express, an admirable trait in a world often filled with deception and illusion. We've all grown accustomed to thinking of people in terms of a broad band of the normal and regarding all others as outside the band of what is normal, as diverging from what is acceptable and natural. We need a new way, a different way of conceptualizing our differences, one which doesn't make me right and you wrong, but one that sees strength in differences, one that sees the ways in which we are unlike as the source of sublime symphonies, amazing art, the mathematics of space, the science of genetics, and a host of other discoveries and inventions that have transformed lives and the world in which we live. What disables neurodiverse individuals is less their impairment than the lack of support, opportunity, and sensitivity to their impairment. What we all understand is that ramps are necessary for wheelchair users, and we understand that audible pedestrian signals support the visually impaired in crossing roads, and that prosthetic devices support individuals with a variety of physical impairments. But when it comes to neurodevelopmental differences and psychological conditions, we are less understanding. Currently, we still characterize autism, attention deficit hyperactivity, obsessive compulsiveness, and anxiety, among others, as disorders in need of correction or cure, rather than as conditions marked by strength in individual cases and in need of support and accommodation. It is worth reminding ourselves just how far we've come since those early identifications of autism. The CDC estimated in 2014 that about 1% of the world's population has autism. With a world population of 7.8 billion, that puts the number of people on the spectrum at 78 million. That's a very large number. Over 20% of the population of the US, if you imagine that all the individuals with autism were collected in this country. It's hard sometimes not to be daunted by the scale of the challenge in the face of the solutions we're offering. We sometimes seem to be offering so little to counter so much. What we need is solutions that will scale, that we can ramp up and leverage, so that a small force, a small action can have a tremendous result. Autistic minds are capable of great focus, great concentration. Sometimes it's said that they perseverate, but I'm always reminded that perseverate has its root in the meaning to persist. And autistic minds can have great determination, a focus to learn as much as they can about a special topic, to persist with a task, a goal, an intention, and so unsurprisingly, they make first-class employees. Inattentive minds, distracted minds, hyperactive minds, they too have strengths. They often have boundless creativity and capable of out-of-the-box thinking, something developed while attempting to corral their own difficulties. Obsessive minds are worrying minds, anxious minds, always considering what might happen, fearful that it might. They can be consumed by their doubts and fears, but there are also many positive possibilities. The superactive mind constantly creating scenarios that might happen is also a creative one. David Beckham, the football star, the actors Leonardo DiCaprio, Justin Timberlake, Charlize Theron have all spoken out about their OCD, but that's not what they're known for. They're known for their remarkable skill and creativity, which is often a hallmark of the condition. We all have strengths, things that we're good at, and using those strengths as a starting point with the child and building on them provides us the opportunity to leverage those areas of interest and ability into areas where interest may not be as high or skills as proficient. One such strength in autism is the attention to detail. Another is the possession of strong visual skills, particularly visual discrimination. Both of these skills are essential in software testing and quality assurance, and so are highly marketable. There are now several companies that have been established around the country. One such is Ultratesting, a New York-based startup founded by 2 MIT grads. It employs 70 workers remotely across 20 states, 75% of whom are on the autism spectrum. A quote from the founder, Rajesh Anandan, resonates with our own thinking. Look at how much energy is spent trying to improve skills that are lacking, compared with the energy spent nurturing their often remarkable natural talents. The image you're seeing here is of Israeli soldiers in a special surveillance program being trained in visual analytics. A few years ago, we met a young man of very strong ability. He was diagnosed with autism, and despite attending a number of schools, both public and private, had been unable to be successful. This profile of a student with significant gifts, but also significant challenges, is not uncommon. And our approach, as it is with all students, is to meet the student where they are with their current constellation of strengths and weaknesses to support, develop, and enhance the strengths while scaffolding and addressing the areas of struggle. In middle school with us, after we accepted him, this young man did high school math. In 9th grade, he took AP Calculus BC without having taken calculus before and scored a 5, the highest score possible. He published his first mathematical paper last year, written when he was in 10th grade. I don't need to tell you how unusual it is for a student to be published while still in school. It happens, but it's very rare. To have this young man be a part of the student body was a gift to not only him, but also the other students there. He made many friends. Students gravitated to him because he was interesting and interested. He had the insatiable curiosity and is a perfect example of what can be accomplished by providing multiple opportunities for success. His argumentativeness and other difficult behaviors vanished to be replaced with discussion and debate, and he has already begun to make his mark. There is no shortage of challenges that society faces, and we need all of our students to harness their creative strengths to meet these challenges. Neurodiverse students are among the most capable students we have. We need to accommodate them and challenge them, but above all, we need to provide them the opportunity to be their best selves. We might well ask where we go from here. What are the next steps that we need to take to ensure that our students thrive as young persons and adults? There's a whole movement, Autism Activism, which embraces various autistic individuals, such as Lisa Elwood, an autistic and bipolar Lenape and Nanticoke Indian writer, Mike Jung, a children's book author, Shane Neumeier, an autism activist and attorney, and numerous scientists and engineers, including Temple Grandin, Greta Thunberg, and Bill Gates. Their passion and drive, their powerful motivation, is what propels them to the forefront of our attention. Be mindful of others' strengths and struggles, of their talents and weaknesses. Support and accommodations are what we can provide in education as much as in life. Let's design a society that is more attentive to the differences among us, to those who think, feel, and experience the world differently than we do. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Crasnow. I've heard you speak a number of times, and every time I'm excited by the prospect of how we can prepare our young people who are not neurodiverse to be successful in this world. And one of the things that, one of those quotes, one of the phrases that you mentioned in your talk was that we need solutions that scale. And so we are excited today to have Rebecca Beam with us, who's the founder and CEO of Zavikon, who can speak about employment opportunities for these same neurodivergent young people. And certainly with Zavikon, she is onto a solution that can scale. So Rebecca, nice to have you today.
Thank you, Jason and Ellis, Dr. Crasnow. That was a wonderful presentation. Thank you so much. So Zavikon, a little bit about me. I've already been introduced by Jason, but I am founder and CEO of Zavikon. Through my journey in technology and working with individuals on the autism spectrum, I really realized that there was kind of a missing link in helping neurodivergent individuals find career-oriented employment. And we do this in a supported way at Zavikon. So we work with employers and candidates to help them navigate their way into supported employment. I am neurodivergent myself, as you can see, and through the supports that I've had throughout my career, it's very much helped me as well, and that's what I want to give back. Next slide. So I was asked to speak today about, STEM careers of the future and where we are in terms of positions and types of jobs that are out there for individuals who focus on STEM. And one of the, overwhelming statistics here is by 2030, we are going to have a global shortage. And I would argue that right now we already have a global shortage of individuals who want to be technology workers. And technology workers can range from engineers to people who are coding, to people who are designing products for technology. In 2016, it was estimated that roughly 3 million jobs outnumbered the amount of workers. Today, that has grown. Next slide. One of the things, and this is a very interesting article that was in Forbes recently, but COVID-19 pandemic has caused a wave of tech adoption. And I know we've all experienced it, and we're experiencing it right now because we're on Zoom. And so, these technology companies have really had to cram a decade of work and tech adoption into the world that they are having to create for those of us who are working remote, are visiting remote. And so this has just created an incredible need for more technology workers. And this trajectory is not going to stop. Next slide. So in June of 2021, there were 365,000 job openings for IT positions. Imagine that. And these are all positions that are very well paid. A career in technology will absolutely guarantee growth and ability to be independent and support oneself. Next slide. And one of the interesting statistics that I came across as I was doing some research for today is the top 10 markets for tech degree completions. Number 2 is LA and Orange County. So getting a STEM education early on is very beneficial for individuals who want to stay in the area and get their degree. Next slide. The other thing that is really, really important to know, and this is going to grow, but companies are embracing neurodiversity in their workplace. And what that means is that they are working very hard to have neurodiverse, friendly environments. That includes creating job descriptions that will attract talent. That includes adjusting their interview processes for individuals who are neurodivergent. So with this growth in companies and an emphasis on hiring individuals who are neurodivergent, this world is becoming a much easier place for an individual to be employed and to get the accommodations that they need. We are at the top of that because we're helping all of these organizations find talent. Ernst & Young, Microsoft, Google, every single day, another company is adding a program. We are working with many major organizations right now to build out their hiring programs. So there is definitely a recognition that neurodivergent employees are incredibly beneficial to organizations. And this is really exciting. And what you could do as parents is also influence your organizations to consider becoming neurodivergent friendly in their hiring. I believe that once your students are graduating, the world is going to be even more accepting and a much nicer place for your student to work. Next slide. And with that, I dropped the mic. I mean, I don't really think there's much more I need to say about the opportunities out there. And one of the things I will absolutely say, when Dr. Crasnow asked me if I would be willing to speak today, I said a resounding yes, because I do believe in the STEM 3 Academy. I believe that everybody should have the opportunity to learn in that manner. Through my journey at MindSpark and Auticon, I actually employed many individuals who went to the help group schools and the STEM 3 academies. And so it has been my pleasure to have opportunity to work with the help group and also employ individuals who were educated at the help group. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. What great work you have done at MindSpark and Auticon and now at Zavikon. I love that piece that you talk about charging all of us to help change the cultures of our own workplace to be more accepting of neurodivergent folks, and so that it becomes a responsibility of all of us. But the work that you're doing is so important to our communities, and we look forward to developing a closer relationship with Zavikon here at the Help Group and at STEM Cubed Academy. So thank you very much for accepting our invitation and talking with us today.
Thank you.
We do have a number of questions that have been posed either in the chat or also while people were asked to submit questions at registration. So I would like to let both Dr. Crasnow and Rebecca have a shot at a few of those. I'll start with a question that came in the chat just recently, and this would be to you, Ellis. It just simply says, what grade do STEM students begin working on robotics and coding? I assume she's referring specifically to STEM Cubed Academy.
Yeah, so a great question. It is part of our curriculum at STEM Cubed. We're a K through 12 school. So in elementary school, K through 5, they do have computer. They do computer programming. They do robotics. And I also, want to point out that there are lots of friendly devices that you can get for very young children, and so there's no barrier at all. Scratch, for example, is a language first developed at MIT. There's even a junior version, Junior Scratch, which we use in elementary school. A very visual language called processing. And they begin with simple programming of simple robots, the idea to try and get a machine to do your bidding, which is sort of the basics of robotics. So it does start for us in elementary school.
Here's a very thoughtful question. I think both of you could address this, maybe Ellis from a school approach, and maybe Rebecca as the same question morphs up into the workplace. So it's, how do you embrace and accommodate the individuality and needs of neurodiverse children without the pressure of them having to live up to neurotypical standards?
Do you want me to go first?
Yeah, why don't you tackle it from, they're actually asking the question about children, so let's talk about it with school, but I think it's also an interesting question when you're thinking about it at the workplace also. So let's go to you, Ellis, and then to Rebecca. I can also repeat it if you guys need it.
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and it is a very thoughtful question. I think that if you begin from the point of view that children who are neurodivergent are less than neurotypical, then there is the implication that how are you going to get them to meet those higher standards, which somehow that you expect them to fall short of. But that's not really, I believe, the way we should view neurodiverse populations. There are kids, as I think I tried to point out, who are on the spectrum, or who have ADHD, or have OCD, or have major anxiety, major depression, a variety of potentially disabling conditions, who are actually far and away beyond a neurotypical ability. So we find extraordinary strengths, we find extraordinary gifts, and these are sort of well documented. Even you take a woman like Temple Grandin, Dr. Grandin, who is a professor at Colorado State, who has worldwide patents on animal husbandry techniques. So in any field, so to come back to the question directly, what I would begin with is to analyze what are their strengths and what are their needed supports. And we want to do both. We want to advance their strengths to help them become expert in their areas of interest and passion, while simultaneously scaffolding their areas of need. So it's not a question of holding them to neurotypical standards, but rather accelerating their neurodiverse strengths. In terms, if the question is just literally academically, Don't they have to meet Common Core standards that everyone does? Yes, they do. And yes, they will. And yes, they can. In the almost 14 years I've been at the help group, I've never seen a student who failed high school, who failed to graduate. So the difficulty, the challenge isn't that these are students who struggle to graduate high school. I think where it's fallen short sometimes is not allowing them really to grow and develop their own strengths to the maximum degree possible.
And Rebecca, I'm gonna repeat the question just because it's been a while since it was asked, and try to sort of transition it to work. So, how do you embrace and accommodate the individuality and needs of the neurodiverse young adult entering the workplace without the pressure of them having to live up to neurotypical standards?
Yeah, so I love this question because it's one that I've been addressing a lot recently. There's a couple of things. One, just like Ellis said, we come at accommodation from a strengths-based perspective. I believe that every single individual needs an accommodation in the workplace. I was a single mom raising 2 children, and I had to get home and get them snacks and get them onto their homework, and then I would go back to work. That was an accommodation. People who have a bad back sometimes need a standing desk. Some people need a bigger monitor, whatever it is. And these are all accommodations that helps the individual be better at their work. So what we do is we go through looking at accommodation and helping the employer understand how to implement these accommodations to make the individual stronger in the workplace. Now, I will say that there are a lot of neurodiversity at work programs right now that are embracing neurodiversity, but also there are organizations that do not understand and are not making the adjustments yet. So I would encourage, as you're going through your college to career transition, that you identify the type of company and the type of environment that you would like to work within. I always encourage our college students that are going into their career to look at that, but also to understand that they could too be a trailblazer. They could go into an organization that might ask them to act neurotypical, but they can also bring their neurodivergent self into the workplace and encourage them to make the changes that are necessary to be neurodivergent friendly. We are seeing this in all of the companies that have embraced it. I'll give a great example is Google. I have an individual who I know quite well who's been working at Google for many years. He is on the autism spectrum, and he has been very vocal about his autism and has wanted to bring neurodiversity into their workplace at Google and to create practices that will support individuals in a better way. Google has now announced that they are working with Stanford University to make these changes so that they will have a better neurodiverse friendly environment and not expect their employees who are neurodivergent to act like neurotypicals. This is a movement, and I do believe it'll continue. Companies like Zavikon are out there being loud about it and encouraging companies to embrace it. And I think the future is really good, but I do encourage you to understand what type of environment would be best suited for you.
I knew we had the right folks to answer that question. Well done. Back to you, Ellis. Why are school programs so quick to remove art programs when art and science can be so easily mixed?
I totally agree. I mean, that's the short answer. There was when STEM began to be a focus for a lot of educators, there's a lot of talk about whether it should be STEM or it should be STEAM, where the A stood for the arts, and then there was STREAM, where the R stood for reading. There was STEAM, where the A stood for architecture. UC Davis has a C-STEM program where the C stands for computing. But I think however you make the acronym, so I prefer STEM because it stands for something which I think we can all relate to. But the question is absolutely correct. There's as much art in science as there is science in art. If you think of a scientist trying to develop an hypothesis, which hypothesis you choose is not scientifically directed. It's something that his own imagination, his own interest, his own background and research forms. So there is an art to that. Just as there's an art to asking the right question. So there's as much art, I believe, in science as there is science in art. And in STEM, we do, in fact, have art and design as a class from elementary school right through to high school.
All right. I'm going to just keep it with you, Ellis, because this is, I don't know, it's sort of on the same track here. The question is, my child is currently in middle school. Is it too late to be introduced to STEM? And should a student be introduced to STEM even if they have no seeming outstanding talents in STEM fields?
Okay, so so to the first question, I think it's never too late to do something which is positive and is going to have a positive outcome for your child. And Jason, as you know, we have accepted students to STEM in 12th grade. As a matter of fact, I remember once advocating for a student to be accepted who was in the second semester of 12th grade. And the question was, why do you want to accept a student so late? So we accept students at all levels of expertise. Some of them come to us in high school, never having done programming at all. I think it gives them an opportunity to be exposed to algorithmic thinking, computational thinking, to programming. I think this is all good. It's a way of expanding their vision of what's possible. And if something resonates with them, if it takes for them, then it could possibly lead to a career or to a college interest. So, so I think it's never too late. I'm sorry, perhaps could you just repeat the second part?
The second part of the question is, like, is a STEM education relevant to someone who doesn't, to a student who doesn't, seem to be blowing the doors off their math tests, or, don't seem to have a lot of talent in that area, at least to observe talent in that area? Can that student still benefit from a STEM education?
Absolutely, and actually ties into the question about the arts. We had a student, actually last year, she's since graduated, who was passionate about art, and she was quite a gifted artist too. She found a way of integrating her art into everything. So in the sciences, in biology, she would do drawings of cell structures. And apart from art and design itself, it gave her a way of expressing herself artistically in relation to a number of different disciplines. And the teachers supported her in doing that. And so we are also great believers in infusing as much of your particular passions as we can into whatever subject it might be: history, math, science. If you're interested in trains, let's count trains. If you're interested in art, let's find ways to infuse drawing into the subject matter.
Rebecca, I heard you say something about the transition from school, from high school to college, and maybe from college to work. But what are some strategies? What are some strategies that school counselors should consider when preparing students for college applications and selecting STEM as a major?
I personally believe that, starting early with the students, as early as middle school, to prepare them for the transition. And I believe a STEM education is critically important in today's working landscape. Just because you have a STEM education does not mean that you have to go into a STEM type career, but it gives you almost a design thinking way of approaching problem solving. So I believe that STEM educations can be an advantage to any individual, whether they decide they want to go and further, into their education in college in STEM or into their careers. But I think one thing that's really, really critically important is to also recognize what your child wants to do and where their interests lie, and let them go with it. You know, many individuals who are neurodivergent have very focused interests. And I believe if an individual is allowed to apply those interests and their talents in a meaningful way, they're going to make an incredible employee. So I encourage counselors to speak with the students and understand where their interests lie and help direct them in that way.
Thank you. Ryan is asking a question in the chat, but also had a question when he registered, and I think they are related. So I'm going to go to this. And Rebecca, the first part's going to be to you, and then the follow-up question I'm going to throw Ellis's way. So the first part of the question, and just for some context, Ryan has a young student who's on the autism spectrum. But how do STEM-based education set up children for college admissions and success?
Well, I think, first of all, many of the colleges are focusing on STEM education because it is the future. So I think a STEM-based education will definitely set you up for success in the future. I mean, I presented the statistics right now, and they will get even larger as the years go by, the need for individuals who are going into STEM type careers. There is such a high demand. So starting out and being educated earlier in STEM is only going to be to your advantage. And then, you know, pursuing that in college as well. But you have to do well in school. So, you know, keep the grades up, study hard, and really focus.
And so the other side of that coin, Ellis, acknowledging the many benefits of a STEM-based education, do you think there are certain areas of a well-rounded education and personal development path that are de-emphasized within STEM? So it sounds like, are there weaknesses to a STEM education? Like, what does your child maybe give up if he or she pursues a STEM education?
Right. I don't think so. And particularly if you're looking at a neurodiverse population such as our student body. So much has been made, for example, of how individuals on the autism spectrum struggle with social communication, with approaching another person, speaking to another person, meeting another person's gaze, and so on. So in STEM, a lot of the work we do is collaborative. So it's a lot of project-based learning that compels interaction. So just as the example of a classroom that I gave by showing them doing a dissection where they're all sitting at a table, if you have an organizational structure where kids are sitting in columns and rows, traditional style, then each child is an island, sort of unable in a sense to communicate freely. If I'm sitting back left, I can't communicate with the child who's sitting front right. He's the opposite end of the classroom, and the teacher would never allow me to yell over the entire student body to talk to that student sitting at the front. However, if we're all grouped around tables, we can freely communicate. So I think the great benefit, or one of the great benefits of a STEM education as we're envisaging it, is that it's very collaborative, communicative, interactive. It compels and encourages individuals to engage with each other. So I think that's a great positive.
I'll take one more. We'll take one more question, but I just want to say something real quick. There are a couple of folks in the chat who are interested in knowing more about STEM Cubed Academy. So we will definitely reach out to you. We're able to track the chat and save it, and we know that you've asked the question. You may also contact me at any time. I may say this again as we close, but you may contact me at any time on my email address. It's my first initial last name, so jbolton@thehelpgroup.org. So please do that if you'd like. Otherwise, I promise we will contact you about your questions. And let's just do one more question. I think it's interesting, and it'll go to you, Rebecca. It says, regarding part-time jobs for high school students, particularly a 16-year-old twice exceptional daughter who is very artsy and sciencey. Any suggestions on how to get her first part-time job, and where?
Okay, well, I have a 16-year-old daughter myself who is looking for her first job, and she is too very artsy. However, getting your first job can oftentimes not be doing exactly what you want to do. She's actually going to apply to the Amazon store to pack groceries because it's close by and she can get there quickly. So I would encourage her to go out and look at the different businesses in the area that will be convenient for her to get to after school. And, you know, there's a whole host of jobs out there, but I would encourage her just to go out and get that experience working, showing up on time, doing a good job, and she'll learn a lot with that experience. It might not be exactly in the areas that she wants to work in, but you got to start somewhere. So just have her go out there and get the job and do a good job. It'll be very fulfilling and a great learning experience.
All right. So we've come to the end of our time today, and I want to thank Ellis and Rebecca for joining us and sharing your expertise this morning with us. And what I'm about to say next addresses a question that was just in the chat. This presentation has been recorded, and we will let you know when it is available to view and share with your colleagues and friends. If there are questions that we were not able to get to today, we will share some of those with you all in a follow-up email as well. We'd like for you to please save the following dates as we have a few upcoming events. The Help Group's virtual summit on October 15th and 16th, which focuses on the advances and best practices in autism, learning disabilities, and ADHD. You can go to our website at www.thehelpgroup.org to learn more about the virtual summit and also to register. Rebecca is going to be talking on October 2nd at a conference called Let's Talk LD College Planning and Transition for individuals who are neurodiverse. And you can learn more about that at letstalkld.org. And lastly, please also join us for our next webcast, which will be on October 20th at 10 a.m. Pacific time, where we will share information about all of the special education day schools that the Help Group operates. If you would like to learn more about our schools and programs before the upcoming virtual open house, you may go to our website at www.thehelpgroup.org, email our admissions department at admissions@thehelpgroup.org, or you can even give us a call on the telephone at 877-943-5747. Thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate your choosing to spend your valuable time with us. We at the Help Group are here for you when you need us. Have a great rest of your day.